Before we get started, we put on the website and on the consultation form, but we start recording training sessions, Zoom sessions, and consultations.
Sorry, say that again?
We put on the website and on the consultation form, but we record Zoom sessions, consultations, and training sessions. Yep. Reactivity? I would have done mine too.
So the big issue, they're pretty good. You know, they've had training.
Okay.
They obviously have e-collars.
E-collar.
I use the mini educator. Lola is more reactive. She's the alpha for sure, even
Okay.
though she's like gets nervous about other dogs. They've really gotten great as, you know, I can keep them controlled on the leash for walking. I sometimes have to buzz them with the educator, like when we see other dogs. They used to be really reactive if they see other dogs.
Okay.
They're really good now. The thing that I'm having huge trouble with is when they're off leash. First of all, recall and leave it when they're off leash. Most of the time, even recall, they'll come right back to me.
Okay.
The problem, and the big problem, is people and kids on bikes or scooters. And if I see it coming, I can like preempt it and keep them, you know, like with only with the buzzer, you know what I mean? Like I'll have to use it. Okay, Iggy, sit. Good boy. I'll have to use it, but I can keep them from chasing. If I don't see it coming and they take off, once they're like off in that adrenaline mode, I can't bring them back. I mean, they'll, even if I buzz them, even if I turn off the buzzer, it's like, especially Lola will just keep going.
Okay.
So,
Sorry, not, I think your light is on this one.
oh, thank you.
Yeah, because it'll kill the battery real
Yeah,
fast.
thanks.
Yeah.
Did that?
One more. There you go.
Okay. Thanks.
No worries. So even if you increase the intensity of the collar, they'll still be reactive.
Once she's in that adrenaline prey drive almost, then I can't get her to stop. And that's the big thing, because we've had a problem with her, you know, then biting to get someone off of a bike and
Like air snapping, biting the leash, redirecting.
actually grabbing them.
Oh, okay.
Not like making a little bit of, I mean, she has drawn blood on a couple of people, which is why we're here.
Is this like you're on the sidewalk and they just come past and you don't have enough time, or?
Yeah, so there's a dog park that's near us where it is off leash in this area, but there aren't fences. And so that was like the first incident. The first incident was a kid riding their bike through the driveway at my parents' house. So they
Sure.
were off leash and, you know, we're fine. But this kid all of a sudden, you know, we have kind of like two different entrances on the driveway. So he came from behind to drive through, to cut through. And she chased him and, you know, pulled him off. Once they stop, she's fine, but she wants to stop them. So she, you know, grabbed his, you know, pants. And then,
This is the brown one?
yeah.
Okay.
And then like he follows her. So he will do the same thing, but it's mostly her that's leading it. I don't think he would do it. And he's easier to get to come back. She has a much higher prey drive.
Okay.
So in the yard, she's like digging up rabbits and, you know what I mean, just constantly running around her post. He'll follow her a little bit and he might chase something if she does, but he'll kind of just hang out.
Okay.
So that's the issue. I mean, we go to the off-leash dog parks all the time in Lake County that are, you know, 60 acres or whatever in the forest preserve that are off-leash. I will call them once and they'll come back to me. I mean, they're very good. People who haven't seen them do that are like, oh, they're so well trained. And they are, until something like that.
So that happens, yeah.
And they also, I think it's all the same thing. And I know this is like my fault, all of it, and especially at home, I haven't been consistent about making them stay calm when someone comes in the door. But, you know, they rush the door, you know, I can use the collars to control them. But if they don't have the collars on, and they're smart enough to know when they don't have the collars on, that they don't, you know, have to pay attention. Like they will.
Correct. Yeah. Collar smart. Yeah. No, it's not uncommon, and I'll talk about that later. What's the highest you've gone on your collars?
I keep her on like 43. Although when I tried to get her to come back when I really needed her, I think I went all the way up to like 70.
Okay.
With him, I keep it on like 55, and that's all he needs. He's very responsive to the collar.
Okay.
Like, he will immediately, even sometimes if he thinks if he sees me touch it, he'll come and sit by me.
Sure.
Like, and I think part of that is from the person, I sent them away. She had some shoulder surgery, and I needed to actually get him away anyway at a certain point, but they went for training separately at someone who took them for 2 months and trained.
Wow,
on,
2 months?
Yeah, on the e-collars. So while she was recovering and then we switched, it was a mistake probably. Anyway, I didn't realize even when we did that the person, he was good. I think he's a good trainer, but he trains hunting dogs and retrievers. Yeah. I didn't realize that his intention was never for them to be off the collars. Like that's just, he keeps his dogs with collars on all the time, and maybe everyone does, but I'd like to feel like if they don't have their collars on, they still have basic, I mean, I guess they have the basic, but I'd like to feel that at least the recall and leave it, whether they have their collars on or not, they will mind me.
Okay. Any reason why you haven't gone higher than 70 for when she's in that zone?
Because she will yelp, like.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
what happens after she yelps?
She comes to me.
Okay.
You know.
So she'll stop the behavior in return.
Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay.
And when there's nothing going on adrenaline-wise, like if I right now hit it on 43, she would yell. Like, but when she's in the adrenaline drive, doesn't seem to matter what it
Sure.
is. She just.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Mom, can you think of it? My mom is like a huge part of their life and is good with training as well.
Yeah, the thing that I would like to see, I know you're sick of hearing me hear about training my shepherd, but she was trained military style. And military style, it doesn't matter who gives the command. The command is the command. Like I'd take her to the vet and she hated it. And, they'd say, "Heel, Missy." And she'd go with them and look over her shoulder at me like, "Oh my God." But she would obey another person. And that's what I would like to see then. I would like to see them, whether it's you or your dad or somebody, if someone comes to the door, I say, "Lola, sit." Iggy said that they'll obey the command without associating it with a collar or a shock or anything. Just a command is a command.
How long was your shepherd trained for?
Oh, we went probably 10 or 12 weeks.
Okay.
But we did it with other dogs.
Okay.
So they were never allowed to smell another dog, to acknowledge another dog. And no matter what was going on, if they heard the command, and we always used her name, "Missy, sit." Missy, I do that with him. Lola, sit. Not just sit.
But
Yeah.
they had the old kind where, like you said, before she went to training, she would be put in a closet in the dark, basically.
In the bathroom, yeah.
Well, but that was like the size of a closet, a little bathroom. This is what they told them to do, in the closet in the dark, to get into the right mode. And then they used a little like slapstick or something, right? That the dog didn't see it coming or where.
Oh, I see something. Yeah.
Like people don't train that way anymore. Obviously, people use e-collars, but they would do that and then choke collars for the command, where
Well,
like the chain,
this.
like choke. Yeah, but the
Yeah.
chain kind.
Was it the prong or slip? Like the chain,
it's a
slip chain? I got you. Yeah.
But that little slap thing,
That was for
It's
other
probably,
dogs, and if you walk by another dog, you brought it down on their nose. And they didn't know where it come from. And so
To keep
then-
them back.
Yeah,
Okay.
to keep them from turning their
so
head.
it was
looking at
not,
another
it was
dog.
never a personal kind of training, like, "Oh, honey, you're such a good dog." It was never, it was just a command and a response to the command.
Yeah,
Correct,
never
yeah.
the positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
Which I know it's changed a lot.
Yeah, I know. We'll talk about that. I know that style of training. There is value to it, but I'll cover everything that you're bringing up because it's all very common. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay.
you know, and they're 3 years old now, so
They're almost 4. They'll be 4 in June.
they're settled down.
Uh-huh.
And they're very energetic. She is just like,
And she's much more skittish. Like,
Yeah, I can
you
see.
tell.
The way that she carries herself, yeah, like this, he's more
He has
even
more
keeled.
confidence.
I see a bit of anxiety.
Yeah.
Even right now when she like lowered her head and
Yeah.
stuff, like, and there's like he's like just, you can tell he's attentive, but he's like neutral.
Yeah.
Whereas her, I can see she's under a
Yeah.
bit of stress right now.
She hides behind him. When they were puppies, she used to jump on his back when a dog was coming. She kind of does all that. But at home, she is the alpha. And even outside, like he listens to her completely. But he does protect her.
And you said they're litter mates?
Yeah.
Okay. How'd you hear about us?
Karen Brosnan with Utah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
really
wow.
Extreme, yeah.
Yeah. Do they still have Utah?
So they're not together anymore. They have a good relationship still, so
Okay.
she still takes care of him at times.
Uh-huh.
She said Utah was like the dog that like didn't react to anything, and you could just like buzz it all the way up to whatever. But he's not a dog she's ever going to be able to take, I think, to a dog park or whatever. But he really learned so much, and he's really good with walking. He can go to the vet, I think, without a muzzle. He can.
Oh, wow.
She walks him in the neighborhood without a muzzle and all of that. So he really is, as I think, as good as he's going to be.
Yeah,
He
I
doesn't have him full time. Steve has him.
gotcha. Yeah. Utah was an interesting case.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad that so I deal with a lot of dogs like Utah.
Yeah.
That's my niche. When I became a dog trainer, 12, 15 years ago, I got into dog training for those dogs.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that get returned, they're the ones that get put down, obviously. But I remember them having Utah, and I was like, this is, at the time even, the first time where I was like, this is where I don't know if this is a good fit. Because Utah, and then you said Karen, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where there was some issues there, because she really loved Utah, and she was well intended, right?
Yeah.
But Utah was not the personality type that you could just dote on.
Yeah.
Like you have to just, earlier when I said there's value to that style of training you're talking about, Utah is that kind of dog, right? Where it's like you do it because I said so, and this is authority, subordinate relationship type of thing. Because if you give them any little bit of affection, it flips things, But yeah, wow, I haven't heard Utah's name in forever. But he's the only.
2020, right?
He's the only Utah I've trained in my 15 years of training, and he was quite the case. Okay, so what neighborhood did you come from?
So I live in the Gold Coast.
Okay.
In the same place as Karen, in the same building, but I live mostly right now at my parents that are in Glenview. So that's where I
Gotcha.
came from.
Okay. So you're pretty close, right? There's a couple of theories in terms of why you're still struggling. One would be it all comes down to how the dogs are conditioned on the collar. Sport dog training or hunting dog training is different than the training that I do. And most of e-collar training or family pet e-collar training is different than what I do as well. So what that means is in the family pet dog training world, the most common form of dog training is called low-level e-collar, okay? Which means your dogs are at ridiculously low levels, like 5 or 8, which your case is separate, and I'll explain that. But a lot of clients come similar, like, oh, this dog has reactivity, I've done e-collar training, it's not working, my levels are constantly up and down, drastically all over the place. And it's because as a trainer, I do a lot of things that you don't do and that you wouldn't know to do. And that actually helps me operate at lower levels, okay? The average dog owner is not going to learn that stuff. It's too complicated. It takes years to develop that level of sensibility with the dog and the e-collar, right? So then I have to go in and then recondition, okay? So that's usually a very common thing that we see. So I get a lot of dogs that are previously e-collar trained, a month, 2 months, 2 weeks, whatever, and then the dog's still struggling with things. I had a dog, for example, that I trained. He did a 2-week board and train. A year post the board and train, when they put the collar on him, he would constantly salivate, shake, and was well-eyed. okay? And they said he's only like this when the collar is on. And I said, that tells me that he was not conditioned correctly.
Yeah.
Plus, they told me the company, and the company's a franchise, where you watch, like they send you 2 DVDs, you go for 2 weeks, and then now you have a business. And it is not that easy to train dogs. So theirs was very easy. I said, your dog's got the training, it's just the communication is not clear. So they did a 3-week, 3-week, once a week program, so 3 hours. I trained the dog for the first class. We recovered heel or covered heel again. I sent them away for 2 weeks. I said, rinse and repeat, come back. 2 weeks later, we're at the park, we're at Oz Park. He's as calm as could be. Okay, and they're like, Jesse, this is crazy. In just that one class, you like fixed how our dog felt about the collar. I go, right, because your dog did not understand the collar. Your dog had plenty of exposure because you'd been using it for a year. It just wasn't taught correctly. So once I fixed that part, the dog's like, oh, I know what this is. I know how it works. And the dog was able to relax. Does that make sense? The other thing that we see, and this is more kind of sport dog training, and it depends what school of thought. Like there's the old school yank and crank, where it's like, if you don't do it, I blast you, right? But it's adapted to collar. But there's also sport dog trainers that do what's called pressure work, okay? So a lot of sport dog and sometimes even family pet stuff is punishment based, okay? The difference between pressure based and punishment based is punishment is typically, I'm gonna shape everything with food. Sit, down, place, heel, right? All these things is done with food for like a week, 2 weeks, whatever. No punishers. And then they go, we've conditioned this dog enough with food or reinforced enough. We're gonna add in the aversives. So we need to have the yes and no concept, right? So they add in the e-collar, but the e-collar comes in as a punisher. So they go outside, they say sit, the dog's distracted, right? Boom. And the dog goes, what was that? Because they've never felt it before. They don't know why it happened, right? So a lot of times they start to freak out or they don't know how to turn it off.
That's the thing that I noticed. We went to pick him up and take her, and the guy was showing us, oh, how good he was. And when he picked up that controller and called Iggy, he ran to him, but he was shaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, there's something wrong.
Yeah. So that's most likely why.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody, and those are like the most common approaches. And there's a separate, like kind of like anybody can become a trainer and then come up with their own theories, right? And I'm sure there's some people that obviously that are good because the dog trainer that trained me figured it all out on his own, but obviously had a knack for it and did it in a way that made sense. Okay, so that's the third option, which is what I call pressure work. Okay. Have you ever pulled up and pushed down to make either of your dogs sit?
I've pushed down. I haven't pulled up and pushed down at the same time.
Okay. So if you pull up on your leash and you push down on the butt, you're putting physical pressure on the dog. And if the dog sits, or when the dog sits, what happens next?
When I've done that, he's sort of just sat there and waited for me.
And then what do you do with your hands and everything? Do you keep pushing or do you let go?
Oh, let go.
You let go.
Yeah.
That's pressure, right?
Yeah.
The moment you give it to me, I let go. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with e-collar. So what I do is as low as possible, but as high as needed. Okay. So I'm in the middle. So I find the number that the dog is bothered by, but it's not so high that it's putting them under too much stress that they're freaking out, but it's high enough that they go, I need to do something about this, right? And I guide them through it. The moment they sit, everything disappears. They get up, it turns back on again. They sit again, it disappears. So the dog goes, hey, every time I get up or whatever, I feel this pressure. If I do this, it disappears. And we keep repeating that. So now the dog goes, if I want to turn that off, this is what I do. And then I slap a word on it, sit. Okay, we do that with heel, sit, stay, down, come, place, all the commands. We shape them through pressure. And then every case is different. So for example, I did a board and train earlier today. It was her first day. She started at 60. As I was conditioning her, it went down to 45. And then we were doing heel stuff. So at the beginning of 60, then it ended at 45. Then I taught her place command. And then in that, we dropped all the way down to 20. And then she was doing great at 20. So in the beginning, because she's not thinking this thing is going to turn on and it's going to tell her stuff, right? I have to teach her that. But as she started becoming more aware, she became more sensitive, SED level starts to dip. Does that make sense? So every case is different. Most of the time it's high and then low. Sometimes it's static and it stays the same number. Sometimes it's low and then goes up high. Every case is different. But when you're teaching it, it all makes sense because the dog dictates everything. If your dog is perfect at 18, I'm at 18, right? If your dog is perfect at 80, I'm at 80. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the reason why that's important is if it's punishment based, the dog does not understand I can avoid the collar if I choose to do this thing or not to do that thing. Does that make sense? You guys drive?
Yes,
So do you run red lights?
I have.
Do you run them on like all the time on purpose? Why not?
I don't want to get a ticket.
You don't want to get a ticket, don't want to get in a collision.
Yeah.
As a human, you have the forethought of running this is a gamble. I might get a red light ticket, right? But if you blow a, let's say it's red for 5 seconds and you continue going, now you're risking collision, right?
Yeah.
But that's what deters us because that's the consequence.
Yeah.
But you understand that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if the dog does not understand the consequence, when it'll turn on, why it'll turn on, and how to turn it off, that's where we struggle with the dog proactively doing or not doing things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just have one question.
Uh-huh.
I know everybody's got these e-collars now, instead of like, my dog was trained with a, you know, just a
The
chain
slip, yep.
like this. And what is the difference? Because when you train him, or when I trained her, as she learned with me,
Mhm.
you know, she was close to me, she was, you know, she wasn't out running across the field when I'm trying to stop her
Mhm.
with something. So why did they switch to the e-collars?
Remote collar gives you on and off leash control. Okay. So, and this is going to touch upon a couple of things. So, like when you mentioned that his dogs are on the collar still, okay, that doesn't surprise me. My dogs are 15 years old. They've been off leash trained since they were 2. If they're going to be off leash or outside in like in a really kind of hectic environment, they will have their collars on. I'm not always using the button. It's simply present in case life happens.
Yeah.
Now his dogs are hunting dogs, right? So they're going to go into drive, and sometimes instinct kicks in, and the dog's like, you know what? I really want to keep this bird or whatever it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in those instances where the dog decides I'm gonna ignore you this time and see if I can get away with it, he has the ability to go,
Yeah.
no, you can't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with, like for example, for myself, with my clients, I'll tell them, when you need it, you have it. When you don't need it, you don't have it.
Yeah.
If your dogs are great dogs inside the house, you don't need it, right? If they're going to be outside off leash, if you're going to be going for a walk, you would need it because of the environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But you shouldn't always be having to use it.
Yeah.
So
I usually don't use it. I don't need to use it.
it's just those adrenaline situations, right?
That's really the only problem because
Mm-hmm.
they're very good otherwise. They come, you know, they're you know, so again, indoors the adrenaline of someone coming to the door.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of them. And then the other is like, if Lola saw a squirrel and I didn't see it across the street, you know, she could easily just dart across the street.
Mm-hmm.
And if I saw it coming, if she was too far into that, even if I saw a car coming, I probably couldn't stop her
Yeah.
no matter what.
Yeah. And we can get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the big thing. The general, like, I do have, every time we leave the house, they have their collars on.
Mm-hmm.
And,
So let's say you're walking one or both dogs. They have their collars on.
yeah,
If you were to give them complete slack and say heel and walk through a busy, calm, whatever, all these different environments, will they stay or do they drift? Do they pull or will they hold?
so I've been in this situation for the last year, mostly at my parents' house. They do hardly any leash walking anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't happen a lot. I'm conscious of it. Like, for instance, last summer, I went to the Lincoln Park outdoor, you know, whatever, the farmer's market with my sister and her dogs. I had them on probably these leashes. I keep my controller and I'll buzz them a couple, as soon, if I see him move or her move or like start to get weird around a dog coming, I'll buzz her for a second. They immediately are like, okay. And we walk through the whole thing, they'll sit down, they'll completely mind me. I just have to see it. You know, I have to be present to see it happening, which is why it's different when it's a situation where they're off of the leash. You know, when they're on a leash, I'm conscious of them the whole time. So there's nothing ever that, like, I see the squirrel when they see it. So, you know, they're not going to surprise me and chase off and run. I don't think they'd do that on the leash anyway. But she's still, like, I have to buzz her a couple times to make sure she knows, like, I'm in control, whatever it is. I would say behave yourself, but I don't think that's what it is. I think it's I'm in control so that she won't, because for a while I was walking them on leashes, and a dog, especially if it's like a big dog or a shepherd or something like that, would come by and they would just go insane, barking, crazy. And so that was like the start of getting, so I had that initial trainer, and then I had another trainer out in the suburbs. We used a different kind of e-collar. He's the one who got me to use this educator or mini educator, and we did a lot of working with just on-leash stuff because I was so worried about that at that time. The other stuff hadn't come up.
So the 2-month board and train was one thing?
That was when they were like like 4 months and
Oh, wow.
6 months old, because she had surgery at 6 months. I guess they were 6 months.
Okay,
And then he was 8 months when he went.
I see.
The other, I think that was last summer, wasn't it? Or the summer before, no, not then, I mean with the other guy in Glenview.
Oh, yeah.
I think
it
that
might
was
have
the
been last.
beginning of last summer, maybe.
So that was a private one-on-one?
It was a private one-on-one.
Okay.
And it was, you know, maybe I had 4 sessions or something, and it was just about leash walking and
Okay.
activity on leashes. And we got these new collars, we practiced and did that, and I'm comfortable with that now. They're not perfect, like if I need to have it, because she will start to react, but the second I see it coming, and even if I don't see it coming, I can control them and we can go. pretty much anywhere.
When you had the second trainer, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, the difference, between the way Missy was trained, military style, and the training I see now is, she was trained to watch me.
Mm.
You know, like the first thing you do is you walk them on a, you know, on the,
But all the trainers do that same thing.
Except this one.
Remember when you came with me, the same thing.
do
where,
they
like,
vote, do
you
they
turn
watch
around.
you, or you're watching them to see that they're gonna do something?
No. So,
This is how I feel the difference is.
yes.
I just
So
got it.
I don't teach to watch me because it keeps you constantly on edge of the environment, right? Because you're like, when they're on leash, I have to be attentive to them and what's going on. So I'm proactive, right? But what I teach is by default, the dog should just know I'm not going to do that. So, like, you get to a point in the beginning, yes, you have to, but eventually you go, wow, I've passed by 100 scooters. There's been no reactivity. So you come to a place of comfort, right? But I always tell people, yes, you want to become confident and comfortable, like my training is working, I know what to do, but not complacent. Complacency is where people start to backtrack. Because I go, oh, my dog's been great those 100 times, right? But I go, maybe the 101st time. So nothing's going to be perfect. There's always going to be mistakes. Or, you know, if you have 100 interactions with the scooter and the dogs blow up 1 out of the 100 times, that's actually pretty damn good, right? But you're so confident in your skills. Like me, I deal with all sorts of aggression that I'm always very calm and neutral, and the owners are always like stressed out. And they're like, how are you so calm? I'm like, because I've done this for 15 years. Right, I already know what to do. There's nothing new under the sun. Dogs aren't going to invent something that I've never seen before, right? They don't have that ability. So I already know everything that there is that they can do, and I can usually a lot of times predict things, which puts me a step ahead, right? But that's why I'm so calm, because I know if things hit the fan, how to recover from it and then continue on with life, because that's part of it. But you also want to get to a point where it's like, I don't want to have to constantly be on top of my dogs, right? Worried that something might happen. I want you to get to a place where you're confident. You're like, okay, my dogs are good. We've closed that little gap that we had. But I'm also aware that they're animals. There might be a snafu here and there, but it's going to stop instantaneously.
I want to say one thing, which is that one thing that's super frustrating, in fact, with me about them is that I saw their reactivity to bike riders before, you know.
Yeah.
When they're on leash, they know that they can't do that because they're on the leash and they know I'm, so
Yep.
what I feel is the tricky part of this with them and the reactivity is that just because they're totally calm when a bike goes by when they're on my leash doesn't mean that when they're off leash, they're gonna be calm.
Sure.
And I do keep them out of that situation as much as I can. Like, once that happened, so it happened in the yard, that's a little bit different because it's our yard and I
Yeah.
shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
When it happened at the dog park, in this one area, because it's open and there's a sidewalk, I stopped going there awfully, just because I was like, if someone goes by on a bike, I don't know for sure that I can stop it. The second time it happened, we were in a different area where it doesn't happen. There aren't usually bike riders, but one happened to come by. And then it happened the other day with my mom. There's a school, my old grade school we go to, it's a totally like, it's a big yard, there's never any other dogs there, which wouldn't matter, but there's, a creek and trees all around, and one little spot where they can get through, and there happened to be a kid on a scooter over in the parking lot that she couldn't even see, and the dogs went around, and the same thing happened. So even that now, I'm like, maybe, when I'm there with them, and now for her, like, we can keep that from happening. But in general, I'm like, maybe I can never be at a place where there's gonna be people going by with a bike, because how am I ever gonna know for sure that they're not gonna do it?
Sure.
Do you think I could get confident enough with training where I could do that? I hate, in most places where someone's gonna come by on a bike, I'm typically gonna have them on a leash. It's just those kind of.
Yeah. I would say there's always the exception. But usually the exception is a certain breed, okay? And I don't like to throw them under the bus or anything like that, is pitties.
Yeah.
I love pitties. I have a pitty. She's my right-hand girl. She's helped me with a lot of aggressive cases. An aggressive,
Cesar Milan.
yes, that's why I actually got her.
Cesar Milan.
The dog whisperer.
He has.
Yeah.
Dad.
Yeah, she's a blue nose like Junior.
Yeah, oh, Junior.
Yes. So that's actually why I got her. She's got the white blaze and the white toes. But yeah, she's 15 now. She's retired. She doesn't do dogs anymore. Is with pitties, a reactive or aggressive pitty is on a completely different level than a reactive aggressive doodle or German Shepherd,
These are
because
poodles.
sorry,
I'm just kidding.
I get so many
No,
doodles.
I know. I'm just kidding. And they have a doodle cup right now.
It's okay. Because that's what they're bred for.
Yeah.
Right? Like an anxious pitty is a whole different game than an anxious poodle. I was going to say doodle again. Or an aggressive poodle, right? Just because they were bred for intensity and they were bred for confrontation and fighting,
Yeah.
right? Every other dog, every other case is completely separate. So I always kind of, when I do my consults for the pitties and stuff, I always go, disclaimer, right? This might be more difficult.
Yeah.
Every other case is pretty straightforward. The only other dog breed that comes close to pitties is healers.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Blue healers, for whatever reason, are like the second craziest dog
Yeah.
breed that I've come across in all my years of training.
Yeah, I know, you bit me.
Blue healer? Yeah. So my answer to you would be yes, if you're willing to put in the work, okay? I can only take you as far as you're willing to go, is what I tell all my clients, okay? I always paint things at their worst. I don't think your case is gonna be anything like that, but I always paint things at their worst, and I'll tell them this is what it may be at its worst, because if they're not willing to handle and accept that, then I can't help them if we end up there,
Yeah.
right? I've had cases where I'm like, this is gonna be easy peasy, and it's been super difficult. I've had other cases where I was like, this is gonna be difficult, and it's easy peasy, right? I've just learned like,
Yeah.
you really can't predict. Every case is different. We have the temperament of the dogs. We have the temperament of the human. Is the human taking in the information that I'm giving and then putting it out correctly? Because people take in and interpret things differently. You know, I've had clients, I'll tell them, you're going to do this, and whatever you do, you're not going to do this. And I literally will stress it. And they go, and they do the very first thing they do is a thing I said not to do. You'd be surprised how often that stuff happens, right? And I go, nope, stop, you're doing it. And they're like, wait, no, I was? I go, yes. I was like, I got it on camera. You know, it's a,
Just don't look your dog in the eye, and this old lady was, she got right down to the
Yeah.
dog's face.
you know, that's just, humans, right? So the human is always the greatest variable. Dogs are pretty straightforward, okay? Because again, dogs, they're not spiteful. They don't do things to get revenge, right? Dogs, they're very honest creatures in the sense of you get what they give, right? They're not going to turn around and backstab you or anything like that. Dogs are pretty straightforward. So when people tell me like, oh, this dog's unpredictable, I go, no, it's perfectly predictable. You just don't understand how to read your dog, okay?
They told us there was no dog too dumb to learn. So
Yeah,
the dog
yeah.
didn't learn.
That's like with
Not the dog's fault.
yeah, exactly. Like Great Pyrenees, a lot of trainers will write off Great Pyrenees as untrainable. I've trained at least a handful of Great Pyrenees. You know, they're not the fastest learners, but they will learn. It's easy. Put your butt down. Walk on a leash. Get over here when I call you. This isn't rocket science, right? So yes, you're correct. It really just falls onto the trainer then.
The other one thing I wanted to say is, these guys are like grandchildren, the grand niece and nephew of a herd of people, and we treat them more like
They're
children.
Yeah.
And I guess that's okay as long as they're not on command, that you haven't
So
given them a direct command.
it's a good point that you bring up, because this is what makes dog training a little bit complex, is that people get dogs for companionship. But that's not a relationship where there's a leader subordinate. Does that make sense? Because you're mutual, you're on neutral grounds. Like I don't tell my friends what to do, and my friends don't tell me what to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when you get a dog for companionship, that's the relationship that people want. But then when it's like, don't be reactive, right? Don't chase that biker.
Yeah.
Don't lunge while you're on a leash, right? Sit when I tell you. That's an authoritative relationship.
More mother-children.
You know, yeah. I usually tell people, think of it parent-child,
Yeah.
teacher-student,
Yeah.
right? That's really the relationship you want to have.
Yeah.
But most people just want the buddy-buddy type relationship, but then get annoyed when the dog isn't compliant. And I go, that's because that's not the relationship that you have. I literally just had that conversation this morning with a client who's picking up her dog from boarding. She's like, man, how do you keep it so quiet here? Like, why does my dog do so much better here, but not at home? I didn't train her dog. She's from another trainer. And I was like, it's because one, you know, when I first started my business or as a facility, I started with one dog, structure and discipline. Then the second dog, like Cesar Milan, structure, discipline. So we only have 20 dogs today because it's the weekend, it's lower. But we have 60, 70 dogs. It's just as quiet. Okay, and I'm a student of Cesar Milan. I credit me being able to do this due to his philosophy. Okay, so this wasn't anything I invented, but I knew it was possible, right? So she's like, how do you keep so quiet? I'm like, well, one, I'm like, we're not here to like dote on your dog. We're here to give your dog structure. And if your dog acts out because he's on a prong collar, we correct him. And because he knows we're consistent here, he doesn't try anything here. But at home, because as soon as she came out, she's like, oh my God, right? She was loving on him and everything, like picking him up. And I'm like, oh, that's why he's not obedient at home, right? So, but you can have both. I just tell people you want to practice more leadership than you do buddyship.
Yeah.
If you practice more buddyship or companionship versus leadership, that's where you're going to start to get that discrepancy, okay? So, questions so far?
No, well, I guess you already said you don't like to say if it's an easy or hard case, but I mean, I feel like
I think all we need to,
pretty good.
yes, you're close. I think what we need to do is, I don't think they were conditioned correctly, okay? It's easy to recondition. Obviously, you've put in the work. It's like with that one case I told you, literally I just said, take 2 weeks and then come back and it helped fix that discrepancy with the dog's understanding of the collar, is changing our theory of the collar, conditioning them correctly. We don't have to recondition everything. If it'll just start to kind of seep, you'll see, okay? And then we have to figure out, probably with controlled contacts, the biker thing, okay? So one issue that I have, and this is a variable, is I don't like the e-collar technology collar.
This
Okay.
one that I have,
Correct. How this is Iggy?
yeah,
How much does Iggy weigh?
like 55 to 58 pounds. I don't know.
How much does
She's about 43 to 45.
okay, mini educator, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. The mini educator is meant for a 35-pound dog and under. Okay. So you know how you said this guy's like 50 and she's like whatever? It's because the output is lower. Does that make sense? So on a higher output collar, your numbers might be like 20 and 25. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the original collars I had were, I think, only 1 to 10 or something.
Yeah,
But
which makes sense because he probably used the Sport Dog collar or Garmin maybe. No, Garmin's like 25. Sport Dog.
I can't remember what the brand was, because I bought it so long ago, but it was just a basic, but if these go higher, do you have to have, I mean, why does it matter if the increments are smaller?
So there's two things here. So I use Doctra, okay, which is another popular sport dog collar. It has 127 levels. This one caps at 100, right? Is that when I started training dogs a long time ago, 10, 12, 15 years ago, whatever, I had a handful of aggression and reactive cases, and they were all getting worse, okay? And at the time, Doctra required you had to buy $10,000 of inventory in order to be a dealer. And I was just starting my business. I'm like, I don't have $10,000. E-collar technologies, I could call them up and they would overnight me a collar the next day, no extra charge. It was like $130, for my cost, and then I can make $50 off the sale or whatever. As all those dogs were on this brand of collar. Okay, so then I went and I bought a bunch of Doctras, and I took their collars because they bought them because I told them to, and I swapped them all out with Doctra. All the dogs started making progress. Okay, my theory is the stimulation comes across differently. This stim is sharper.
Okay.
Doctra is duller. Okay, so when you said earlier, if I go up, she'll yip, right? And it's not that dogs don't yip with the Doctra collar. Okay, is that with the sharpness of it, the dog, I don't believe, interprets it correctly. Okay, we want the dog to perceive the collar like a bite. Does that make sense? Dogs nip and bite, as opposed to just this thing that happens. Okay, part of that is conditioning. Part of it can be the collars. Now, considering you've done all this work already, I'm okay with, if you decide to move forward, using these tools. But if we get to class 2 to 3 and you're still struggling, I'm going to look at the collars.
Yeah, okay.
But the only issue is you've now wasted 2 to 3 classes. And I've had this happen to clients in the past. And on average, an hour of time is $200-something,
Yeah.
right?
How much are the collars to buy?
For a 2-dog system, so they recently discontinued the collar that I would recommend for them. Off the top of my head, because there's 2 ways to do it, I just recently found out. There's one where it's a big, bulky remote. And I think the collars with the remote, you're probably looking at around 400-ish with tax. And we can send you an estimate. There's another model where the remote is more to the hand, which also comes with a, it's called a hands-free system, where it's like a ring, and you can just press it, so you don't always have to have the remote in your hand, because a client recently asked about it. And it can be paired to the collars that I'd recommend, and I would say it's probably going to be around the same-ish price, if not a little bit less. Okay, and they can send you with taxes what it would look like.
Yeah.
Okay, but I've had this happen in the past because E-Collar Technologies is a very popular brand because of that reasoning. It's affordable for the trainer, it's affordable for the client, so it's not like, hey, you have to buy this. Like the Doctra Black Edition, which is like the best training collar there is like $340-ish with tax. Whereas the E-Collar Technologies version, I think, is like $270-ish with tax. So it's much more easier to swallow for the dog owners. They're like, oh, okay, cool, right? But the issue is just how the stim is delivered, which is why I stopped using this brand so many years ago. Okay, the only time I'll use it, I've had lots of clients come through, again, failed board and trains or failed trainers. I had a client who had like 2 different trainers, both with E-Collar, both of them failed. Okay, and then I came in, we switched she was like, I'll just do whatever you tell me. She got the Doctra, no problem, fixed the reactivity, dog's good now. Okay.
Send me
Yeah.
I'll just look at it.
But-
The ring thing sounds interesting. I
Yeah.
like the idea of not having to have it.
So,
What about the weight? I took them off, I don't know, last night or something. God, these things are so heavy.
Well, I
What?
also have.
the collars? So the collars are going to look different. They're going to be a little bit bigger. because it's more output, okay? But it's a curved collar. So with these guys, it's really, the curvedness helps mask the collar. Before it used to be like that box, but 2 times the size, okay? Because of the output. So the difference here is once we get into the situation of adrenaline, right? You've already hit 70 out of 100, right? But the behavior keeps coming up. So what do you think that tells me?
It's not working.
It's not working, and we need more power, okay? Now, let's say you told me that you've maxed out the collar and you've remoted her at 100, and the behavior continues to happen. I would most definitely tell you you have to upgrade your collar, because if you already corrected at 100 and the dog continues the behavior,
Yeah.
then potentially we have the issue of output as well.
Well, and I will say this, in all of those times I just mentioned, there was probably only one time when I had the ability to change it and get it to 70 and do it. On almost every other time, I'm sure when you were doing it, the remote was not even on. When the other time, I'm not even sure the remote was on the first time it happened with me. When that kid was going by, I didn't even
Like turned on.
know if their collars were on. Yeah. So it's not that, even though I presented it this way originally as I'm thinking about it, it's not necessarily that if it was really high, I couldn't stop her. It's also partly that I wasn't prepared for it.
Sure.
And did, you know,
Yeah, like,
If that
she
makes sense.
chased a rabbit the other day, and we have woods, and I heard the rabbit scream.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked over, and I buzzed her, and I buzzed her, and I buzzed her, and she wouldn't stop, and I whistled and chased her, and when I looked down, I had turned the power on in my.
Oh, sure, it happens.
Yeah.
It wasn't her fault.
yeah,
So, to give an example, because we also have the variable of prey drive.
yeah.
Right.
And that's her big, I mean, she's caught 2 squirrels and killed them, like shaking them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's a predator.
Very fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a video that I put together of this, both a short and like a long form. Is last year my most reactive case was a little like 25-ish pound dog that looked similar to a min pin. Okay. When we had our consult, I remember going like, it was my last consult of the day. I was tired, and I was like, I don't want to set up my camera. So I just had the consult, and I should have recorded it because the dog was ballistic the entire time. Humans, dogs, people, strollers, rollerbladers, every single thing the dog was just flipping out on. Okay, and I'm pretty good about helping the client de-escalate the dog. This dog was too far gone. Okay, so I told her, you want to get the Dog to Black Edition, right? Which is again meant for a 70-pound dog and over. It's meant for a Rottie. Okay, and she didn't question it. She just did it. It took me until the 4th to 5th class to finally break the reactivity. And we had to correct the dog at 127 continuous, which is the harshest correction that you can give. There was vocalization, okay? And I told her, take 2 weeks, and then only come back if you've made progress. If you've not made progress, email me. I see her 2 weeks later. She's like, Jesse, night and day. We went, there was, again, all the stimuli, because we were at Oz Park. Oz Park is the busiest park in Chicago. Dog didn't make a peep, okay? And I told her, good job. Because the human logic goes, I have a 25-pound dog. I have a remote collar meant for a Rottweiler. I'm blasting this dog at 127 continuous, which is the harshest thing that we can do. But remember, that was class 4 to 5. So we took classes 1, 2, 3, 4 to try everything else, and it wasn't working. So I go, this is the last resort, right? This is the final step. And she did it, and that's why she made progress. So I have this, I put her video up. The dog's name is Georgia, okay? And we can send you the link so you can just have an understanding. Is that the saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the fight in the dog, is a very true statement, okay? So in her case, 25-pound dog with the reactivity of a powerful power breed type dog, okay? But because the owner just said, right, Jesse, whatever you say, I'm gonna do it, we got the progress. So after that, we were just doing off-leash training because she corrected the behavior, which is the biggest wall that we'll hit. If you cannot control the behavior and get the dog to think, do I really want to be reactive? You're not going to get anywhere with anything else. And so we're at the Oz Park. She's got her dog in a long leash, stuff going on around her. We even had a dog cut through while we were doing recall training, didn't make a peep, right? So that's why I mentioned earlier, I can only take you as far as you're willing to go.
Yeah.
So if we're using these tools, and this is a low output collar, right? And then we're in the situation and we hit max power, it's going to be hard for me to give you a concrete answer if we're going to get there, because to me, this isn't the best system.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I would say invest in the best system, so that this way I know if we end up I'm going to get it sooner or later. I don't have to worry about, well, now there's the variable of we need to change the collar.
Yeah.
Okay. At the end of the day, you can make your decision, but that would just be an example.
Just send the stuff to me.
Well, the one thing I guess I don't understand is you keep talking about the class.
Mhm.
Are you talking about individual, like these two would have their own class? Are you talking about,
Yeah, so I do one-on-one.
Yeah.
Okay. We're actually looking to do group in the future, like for people to have. So it's funny because a lot of places do group training for newbies, and I think it's the other way around. I think it should be in person first, private, and then once they have enough training, enough training, need to train that fly. Then group classes make sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because now you come in with skills, you come in with an already trained dog, and now you put them in an environment where there's distraction of other dogs, right? But usually with group classes, it's like people got reactive dogs and this and that. Everybody's got their own questions and stuff like that. That it's like you're just on a whole bunch of different pages. And at the time, I didn't have the space. This is 18,000 square feet of space, so we have plenty of space now to start to offer that. But we do one-on-one. I don't cover anything that I don't think you need. I just cover the essentials, okay? So here, I would say this is simpler than we think, okay? Because all the work's been done. It's just that we need to condition them correctly, okay? So the first 2 classes would be on heel, okay? Making sure that they understand it. So my style of heel is very strict. If you take 1 step, they take 1 step. You take 5 steps, they take 5 steps. You stop, they automatically sit. I don't care what the environment is, okay? I don't care if you got skateboarders, rollerbladers, strollers, right? That level. It sounds complicated. It's not. Once you understand how to do it, then I go, rinse and repeat. Every time you go for a walk, you're employing this theory, okay? You come back week 2, you give me feedback. Hey, Jesse, they're walking better. They weren't pulling this and that, but when we saw skateboarders, it was still happening. I go, okay, cool. Thanks for the insight. We're gonna work on the second half of heel. We're gonna make a couple of tweaks, go off, rinse and repeat. You come back class 3. Hey, Jesse, wow, even better. But scooters, right? So I go, okay, no big deal. Let me go grab my scooter. Now we're doing controlled context, okay? And we're figuring out what is it that the dogs need, or that she needs really, to stop the behavior. But we don't just want to stop, we want to deter.
Yeah.
Stop and then deter, right? So then you go for a walk, maybe you see the first scooter or whatever, you correct her, she stops, and then you see 4 scooters, nothing happens. Then you see a 6th scooter, she blows up, you correct her, but you already saw a gap. When you start to see gap in behavior, that's how you know you're making progress, okay? If an owner tells me, like the lady with Georgia, every week she came back, her obedience is good, the reactivity is terrible, okay? So okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. And the reason why I do it that way is if we do end up in this max power range, for the human, you're validated because you go, we've already tried everything else. Does that make sense? So I already knew when I saw Georgia, I already knew it's going to be 127.
Yeah.
But the owner has to experience that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If I would have just said day 1, 127,
Right.
she would have been like, am I doing the right thing? Is this guy, he's just blasting dogs on max power?
Yeah.
But we did 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, all the way up to 127. And not till we hit that number that she say, you know what, Jesse, I started to see progress.
Yeah.
And that's what helped her go through it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a logic. So behavior work and obedience is separate.
Yeah.
Obedience is skill. Sit, stay down, complacio. Anybody can really teach that, right? But when we deal with behavior, I also have to account for the human and their comfort, right? Because there's even times when I doubt, right? With Georgia, even I was like, man, this is a 25-pound dog. This is crazy. But I was like, well, she's a dog like any other dog. Everybody's got a breaking point, So that
For Utah.
except for Utah.
No breaking point.
Well, technically there's a second step to that, and it's a second collar.
poodles are so smart though. I mean,
Well, this isn't about.
really do learn.
Well,
His stuff is more, who knows what his past was. He came from a shelter. He's basically Steve.
Oh,
from
you
the
mean
dog farm.
Steve's dog?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
but these poodles, I would expect them to learn fast, because they're just smart dogs.
Yeah,
Well-
and they're reactive, like, they're not gonna need, I'm
Rottweilers
positive they won't have to go out to sleep.
Well, it's not about intelligence.
Right.
It's about, so think of obedience as education, sit, stay, come, math, English, science. And think of behaviors as morality. Don't jump, don't bark, don't bite, don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat. So like a very intelligent person could be a very bad person.
Yeah.
But a not so smart person can be a very good person, right? Those things don't correlate. Now, the training isn't what's addressing the reactivity. It's discipline. Does that make sense? It's the discipline. So once we fix the conditioning, but then also find what is the correct number. So I'm a balance of as low as possible, as high as needed.
Yeah.
If the dog goes, man, if mom's getting me at this number for just forgetting to sit or whatever, what's it going to be if I become reactive? Like it starts to make the dog second guess things and go, do I really want to gamble this behavior, understanding there may be a consequence? But they have to understand why.
Yeah.
If they don't understand why, then you get this constant, I have to correct my dog for this behavior, but they never make any progress.
And I think Iggy basically already has that. And she just is much more impulsive. And so, I mean, you'll tell me we'll do it, but I mean, Iggy, and maybe it's from harsh training at the beginning with that, where he just was more sensitive to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, even if I, just one buzz of anything with Iggy, he'll come and just sit next to me, like he immediately, whereas she will do what she wants to do, and,
And that could be just temperament. Even though they're litter mates, like everybody, like you could have twins and it's two different kids.
That's how these two
yes,
are.
they are definitely.
Yeah.
He's very laid back and.
I would most likely cut, so you want to do in-person training, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I would most likely put you at about 6 classes.
Okay.
Okay, so we do 3, 6, 9, and 12-week programs, 1 day a week for an hour. Okay.
And obviously both of them.
Yes.
Okay.
And you're not paying per dog, by the way. Okay. Yeah, you're not paying per dog. I do recommend that the first 2 classes you extend by half an hour, which is, I believe, an extra $100. So we get 45 minutes, so we're not trying to cut it tight, okay? I would look at it as, out of 6 classes, the first 2 are gonna be on heel, because that's what's gonna help recondition everything, okay? Then by the end of the second class, or like between 2 to 3, that's gonna tell us where we're at in terms of the behavior, okay? Remember, you're my feedback. Let's say for whatever reason, the reactivity stuff, we need to really address it. Then class 3 is a controlled context. That sets the foundation. Okay, so now the dog goes, okay, we've done this before, and I make the dog stop by the end of class. So they go out into the world going, okay, I have to cut the crap. Does that make sense? But remember, stop and then deter. So then during that time on the 3rd class, because I know this is your goal, I might tell you, don't come back for 2 weeks. Okay, and then email me a week and a half later, give me an update. If you're still struggling, I would most likely go back and forth with you via email, because once you understand how to stop, it's really just adjusting things. Does that make sense? And then once we get it done, we're like, Jesse, I've seen 100 scooters and not a peep, right? Whatever, off leash, on leash, and I go, great, now we can have class 4. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I would most likely, it sounds like they have decent recall, but most likely I would say,
Yes, if there's not something going, if there's not a squirrel or whatever.
okay.
But yeah.
So I would cover recall
I
again.
mean, yeah, I mean, I'd like for you
You're
to
okay.
cover it so that you see it, but like when we're at the open air dog park or whatever, and I call them once, I mean, they'll come running.
Right. But if there's a squirrel, there's
Mostly her. Even with a squirrel, he pretty much will still come, but every now and then he'll like wait a second to see if she's coming. Wait.
sure. Yeah.
Litterman thing, but
So class 4 would be that recall most likely. I try to get recall as soon as possible just because it takes the longest to really get
yeah.
fully proofed. I had a client tell me that her first dog, because I trained her second dog, she told me her first dog took her 6 months before she considered her to be fully off-leash, reliable, and proofed. I go, that makes sense because there's a lot of variables there. You got the weather, you got the environment, I hope my dog leaves my side and gives me an opportunity to practice the recall. I don't do stay to come because that's not realistic. Your dog's going to be chasing something. Your dog's almost always, when people use recall, the dog's chasing something, running away, or running towards something they shouldn't, like the street, right? It's almost always an away motion. So we want to make sure that it's going to be applicable in those moments. You said something about guests coming over. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
So
I think they're in charge of the door.
yeah. So one would be a stationary control like place command. That's one part of addressing it. And then there's a separate exercise that I teach, which can be done in home, where I show you how to actually address the door stimulation or the territorial behavior to calm them down, so that this way they're not on 10. Because then even if they're friendly, when the guest comes in, if they're on 10, that's where things just start to escalate. Okay. So all that realistically can be done within 6 classes. Also because you've already done a bunch of training already. I'm just coming in to help kind of close that last little bit of gap.
How much time, I know, I spent a lot of time training Missy. You know, I think probably an hour a day.
So the way I train is once you've learned the skills, you just use them as you live your life. The only time where you have to do training sessions is if the owner is looking to build sit, stay, down, come, place, heel to an off-leash level, right? So then they'll go to the park, bring their long leash, and then as their dog is chasing squirrels, as their dog is playing with dogs, they're using their obedience in those moments because it's distracting, right?
like a 30-foot leash.
Yeah.
That you're,
Yeah, 30 foot's perfect. So I always tell my clients, find at least one time a day, even after training, once a day, that you're using the commands. That's what keeps them applicable and functional. So like usually people train 15 minutes, right? In these very controlled contexts. And then one day they hope my dog will recall at the park. I go, no, you have to be at the park while stuff is happening
yeah.
and doing your training there so that the dog goes, oh, if I'm playing with my friends, if I'm chasing a squirrel, if I hear a firework and I take off, like, come is come. I have to do it, right? Oh, sorry, it's my dog.
But,
Okay.
okay, Lola.
That's Zena.
Okay.
That's actually,
like-
she's the dog that inspired me to become a dog trainer.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, they're good with other dogs, so
They are, but when they're on leash,
Yeah.
that's it, like, they don't do that.
They're
They
at
work on
attention.
leash and
Yeah, that's funny. That's okay. She just came to see what's. Yeah, that's what keeps them functional. Is I tell my clients, you're training as you live your life with your dog, so that the one day that you need it to work, it's gonna work. Okay.
I told Missy to sit one day, and I went to the grocery store and forgot, and I came back.
She's still sitting.
Still in the same-
Yeah, I always tell my clients, I'm like, technically speaking, that's how that's supposed to work.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
That's why with the old school training, which was very much punishment based, the expectations were very black and white.
Yeah.
So even though yes, training has gotten better, I'm an adaptation of that training because I'm as low as possible, as high as needed. But if I have to go to 127, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas before it was just sit, right? It just happened. So the dog's like, what the hell? And you just made them figure it out. But because of that, that's why it was good. It's just looked down upon because positive reinforcement is obviously a big thing. The world has changed in terms of how it views things and all that stuff.
For dinner.
Yeah, even with raising kids, it's the same thing. Positive versus positive punishment. Yeah, no. So yeah, I would say I'm confident that with the 6 we can get all that stuff done. If you wanted a buffer, there's 9, which just gives us more time to condition other things or really foolproof any off-leash training that you have. Because I'm looking at the core things would be people coming over and then the reactivity,
Yeah.
right? So that's me kind of saying at the shortest, this is what I would do. I wouldn't do 12. 12 would definitely be overkill, okay?
Can we say 6 and then
Add,
at certain point see, okay, maybe we're gonna need.
you can, but we don't prorate programs, okay? So the reason is when you book your time, usually we do recurring times once a week, right? So let's say 12 o'clock on Saturday worked for you. You're on class 5, you're like, oh wow, I'm making a lot of progress. I want to advance the rest of my training. You have to rebook again because I have other clients. So I'm booked ahead of time. So if you did 6 weeks and you did Saturday at 12 for 6 weeks plus 1, so 7 weeks is your time. No one can take it from you, right? Let's say you get sick, you have to reschedule, you go out of town. We have those times. But then let's say you use up to your 7th week and you have 2 classes left over, and I have a client booked after you because the expectation was we would wrap up on this date. Does that make sense? So then Tina would go, okay, you use it, what we call your priority, because that's your time slot. We have another client booked at that time now. What other times are you available? And then we finish the last 2. If you add on another 3, you would have people ahead of you. Does that make sense? So then you'd have to find a whole new spot.
I'm pretty flexible in terms of time.
Okay.
Like, I have my own thing, so I am flexible.
Okay.
But, so as long as I can be flexible, does it seem like that would make sense to do 6, and then if we had to add 3, add it, and I'll just take whatever slot or
Yeah,
time
that's fine.
is available? Okay, let's do that. I mean, yeah, I think that, if that makes sense for you, that
Do
would.
we have to stop treating them like babies though?
So, no,
Children, as long as we're the leaders.
yeah, no. So,
But see, even like, they're pretty good.
yeah, no, that's why I'm like, I'm not saying like you have to do a full blown, like we have to do everything from scratch. Like the really things that only I care about are the heel,
Yeah.
recall, because those are the 2 most important things.
Yeah.
The play stuff, just because that's technically an answer for when guests come over.
Yeah, I like that command. I mean, I would like for them to really,
What is
the original trainer called it kennel up, he would say, and I use it sometimes, like for them to go somewhere, but I'm not super consistent with it. But it's basically to get them to like,
Yes.
say place, like you point at something.
Yeah, that's an elevated dog bed. You can see it flipped up.
Yeah, I have those.
Yeah, so if you place your dog, they go to the bed, they can sit, stand, lay down. They just cannot step off for any period of time. Whether it's 15 minutes or 3 hours, they're expected to stay put
Yeah.
on the object. Yeah. It's the easiest of all the stationary commands.
Yeah.
So I always tell my clients, it's like the trifecta of training. Walk with me, come to me, and don't move. Those 3 things will let you do a ton of stuff with your dog.
Yeah.
Sitting down and stay are kind of superficial in the sense
Yeah.
that like sit, a dog really shouldn't sit more than a few minutes. Like I don't have dogs sit for 30 minutes. It's just physiologically uncomfortable, you know?
Get the
Yeah, yeah. But technically speaking, yes, obedience can be trained to that degree. Down command, also meant for extended use. It's just more strict. And clients don't like having to worry about if the dog is sitting or standing from the down. So if they send them to place, sit, stand, lay down, I don't care, just don't get off. It's like the easiest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what most people are trained with when I train them. But I do train all commands up to an off-leash level, plus like other stuff that's like advanced or whatever. But I get like 1 client a year that goes beyond the norm.
I guess the other command, but maybe as long as the recall, I guess I'd be using it the same thing as the leave it command.
Oh, sure. So once we cover how to correct behaviors and stuff. So I actually don't teach leave it. Okay. Let's say you're at the dog park or you're at the park and they find goose poop, right? If you don't see that they found the goose poop and you're not there to say leave it, they can technically eat the goose poop until you say leave it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I want the dogs by default to smell the goose poop and go, we can't eat that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I teach things by default because that's usually what people want. But
Yeah.
because we're sound-based and most training is there's a command for everything. Like I had a client, it was heel, left, right, stop, slow.
Wow.
Right? And she was saying all these things when she was walking with her dog. And the dog was doing none of it. Okay, and I said, okay, we're gonna remove 4 or 5 of those words and we're gonna use 1 word, it's heel. Everything else is implied. Everything else is expected.
Yeah.
Right? And then we got it done. Right?
Yeah.
It's just, again, humans are sound-based.
Yeah.
Dogs don't know. You could use fridge, finger,
Yeah.
Ball for all your obedience commands, and the dogs don't care, right? It's what they're taught in response
Yeah.
to the sound.
And basically, when I would use leave it, basically what I want is for them to come to me. You know, it's them not to chase a squirrel, not to chase a whatever.
Yeah.
and-
The expectation is,
Not to have the smell of a squirrel and not to follow.
yes,
Well,
That-
this
that's the
site.
default. So, and this is where the variable comes into play. Let's say, was it Lola?
Yeah,
Lola has a very high prey drive.
yes.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
she smells, she's out the door.
It's rare, but it can happen. Where a dog's prey drive is so high, you won't ever get them to fully self-regulate. It'll be much better but you're like constantly like I'll go, all right, like I had a dog, it was like some kind of beagle mix. And I didn't think this was going to be an issue, so I recommended her the medium high-powered collar, which is a step below. And the dog had the craziest prey drive because she got the dog in the wintertime, so we were training in the wintertime. Then when spring, summer came and squirrels came out, and she lived over on the lakefront in Lincoln Park, she's like, Jesse, I'm at max power. This dog is blowing past it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I did not see that coming. I'm sorry, you know? So she had to upgrade her collar. But with that particular case, she knew her dog's intensity was just through the roof, and she was always at 127 whenever she was in the park with squirrels. And the dog would look, and you can see where the dog was like gambling, do I want to take the 127 or not? So there was gap, whereas before the dog would just go and have no regard for the owner, okay? But that's really the prey drive. That's nothing that I can predict right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to say probably not.
Yeah.
Going by breed,
Yeah, hers is strong, but like, again, it's like on a leash, because I live next to that part, Lincoln Park, where everyone's basically an off-leash dog park, the part that's right by North Avenue, and I live, you know, I would take them on a walk there, and then when we get to this part where you have to cross through part of the park with the trees to get to the baseball fields where the dogs run around, there's a ton of squirrels running around, but if I had the, you know, the buzzer in my hand, and when she'd start to go, I'd buzz her, she listens, like, she doesn't want it so bad that she'll do that, but she'll still be like walking and looking the whole time, so
Well, you know,
maybe it's like medium-high prey drive, like, it's not so high that she's gonna,
yeah.
where that rabbit nest was, you know,
Yeah.
by the wall thing, she runs straight to that, and I whistle, and she leaves.
yeah, so, anyway,
So,
hopefully
I mean,
they're-
that's,
it's
we.
high,
we
but
have
not as high as that default.
Yeah.
a Nest, but she knows where the nests are. And
Sure.
She goes and smells them, and when I see her close to where I think that they are, I whistle, I just whistle, and she comes back.
Yeah.
I don't think she's abnormally high.
Yeah. I mean, she's a predator,
Yeah,
right? Like,
Yeah,
you know, I tell clients like for example, my Chihuahua killed a squirrel. It was a baby squirrel actually, in Grand Park because they fell out the tree. And I just saw him shaking something, so I remoted him and he like spit it out and it died. And then somebody was like, "Oh my God, your dog's an animal," and I'm like, "He's a fucking dog."
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It is.
Yes.
No, I know,
That's-
that's,
Yeah.
that, don't be
I
mad
know,
at
she was
them,
so
that's her
proud,
nature.
she brought the baby squirrel, I mean, it was like one shake of her head and it was dead.
Yeah.
And-
No, it's unfortunate, but dogs are predators.
Yeah.
But you know, we don't want to have to worry about, like I had this happen to a client where the dog was chasing the squirrel, and instead of running to the tree, the squirrel went across the street. Yeah.
That
is
happened to me
always
one time at the park, at the park where there's the street and it's not separated. They jump out of the car normally and they go right to the park, like you know, the parking lot is right there, there's street parking, you just hop out and go. It only happened to me once and it's made me conscious of it ever since. She jumped out and there was a squirrel on the other side of the street and she ran right, and thank God there wasn't a car there, because I mean, we're on the street. It's
Yeah.
just, you know,
That's stuff that people don't
But-
count for.
it's, yeah, I just
Yeah.
didn't see it.
So here, one thing that you can do as well is like, so we have break, my word is break or free or, you know, okay, is the release. Is what we call the secondary release. Okay, it's like a dog can be off leash and he'll see a squirrel, but it goes, I don't have permission for that, right? But if the owner wants to let the dog chase a squirrel, they would release again and the dog goes, now I can go.
So it's interesting you bring that up, because I would have forgotten, but the weird thing about that initial training is that he didn't have a release command, ever. And he said, I want my dogs always to feel that they're on all the time. So he had no release command. I think they get my release command, because I'll say, okay, go, you know, I kind of don't do it in a specific, I usually say, okay, is
Sure.
what it is. So I think they know that that's it, but I wouldn't mind, like.
Yeah, so we have to fix that.
Strict. Yeah,
We had your free.
you're free is what we do.
You're free.
And he's coming from, you're talking about the hunting dog guy? Yeah. So I give, I'm not a hunting dog trainer, so I go whatever, but it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So I tell people, think of your obedience as clocking your dog into work. And then when you say break or okay, you're clocking them out of work.
Yeah.
There has to be an on and off switch,
Yeah, that's what we.
right? Because like if I tell the dog to sit, I'm like, when is the dog supposed to release from the sit then? If
Yeah.
it's always on a go? So yeah, but yeah, they need to have a release. Okay, which is easy. Other questions?
Just have to pick the right word or pick the word you want.
Yeah, as long as it's consistent. And in my opinion, dogs do know when you're talking to them because of energy, and usually you are facing them. Because I've had clients who are like, how's the dog know if when I say okay to like to my significant other or whatever, or to them? And I go, well, typically when you release them, you're looking at them and you're okay, right? The energy is different. Whereas if I go, yeah, I'm okay, that's a completely different energy. Plus, where it's being projected is different, right? Is in my opinion, the dogs do get that. It is rare, but it does happen where I'll be saying like down in conversation and the dog will down, but it's not very common. So yeah, I think with 6 classes, we should be able to clear this stuff up. Tina will send you the 2 options for the collars with what they would cost all in with tax. Okay. If you end up getting the fingerless 2-dog system, that one I don't have in stock, so you may have to order that directly from Doctra.
Okay.
I would think they would.
That's the one I'm most interested in because the fingerless.
I have the single dog fingerless because I buy product and then it's rare that the client goes, I need this particular model. This client that wants it is the first client in the 4 to 5 years that it's been released, and I've had a couple on stock of a single dog who's actually even wanted one. I have 3 that are sitting there that I bought like 4 years ago. So that's how I go. So, but Doctra should be able to pair it for you and everything like that. And we can help you in terms of placing the order with them. But other than that, I think with 6 we should be fine. So we're still training here because of the rain, right? So once we know we're past the rainy season is when we go to Oz Park, okay? Which I think is probably what you're wanting, okay?
I mean, that would, with the bike thing.
Yes. So technically speaking, environment doesn't matter, but the clients do like being out in the real world environment, getting the hands-on experience, okay? If you wanted to start sooner, you could do the first couple of classes, which is the heel stuff, take a break for the 3 weeks or whatever until we're back at Oz Park, just so you have that initial stuff down. And then once we're at Oz Park and we're in the thick of it, at least you already have the theory down in terms of.
That
Okay.
sounds good. Yeah.
But you're welcome to just push it to when we're at Oz Park.
What would it be? When would it?
It's close to when the kids get out of school. The reason is, 1, Oz Park floods. 2, we had it where we tried to go sooner because it seemed nice. Like, remember when we had that warm weather a few weeks ago? Like, everybody was like, oh, can we go to the park? Can we go to the park? Right? But once we're at the park and then it just switches to cold, now we're switching again. But now it's with rain. So, like, we'll wake up in the morning, it's raining, and then the client's like, oh, like, could we reschedule and stuff? And I get backed up. So usually we just relocate, but then Tina's got to call 8 different people to tell them, hey, we're relocating because of the rain. So now we've just learned to just kind of push it off.
Let's do the couple classes first because even if we need to wait longer, take whatever break for the park, that gives me time to just be rehearsing all of it.
Yeah, and you can email me whatever, and then what you can do is, because I don't know off the top of my head when we will be going back to the park, but you can ask Tina, because Tina's my newer assistant. Maria still works for us. She just works here now. And she actually has it on her calendar when we switch to the park. And you can already pre-book class 3. So that once we're at the park, you already have your time. You don't have to worry about scheduling again.
What do you do if it's raining on that day?
Usually we relocate. If I know it's a client that has to be outside, like in your case, because of the reactivity stuff, I'll push people. But I try to limit it just because I will get backed up. The other issue is, like, let's say you're at 2 o'clock, I have a 1 o'clock and a 3 o'clock, is now I'm stuck at the park with nothing to do. That's the other hard part about. So I try to be understanding, but at the same time, I also try not to just sit at the park for an hour with nothing to do. But yeah, if I know a client, like I get clients that do off-leash training, and I go, there's no point in going here because you want to be outside and do this stuff. So I'll usually just push them out, but we'll just play that stuff by ear. Okay?
That's why I got to pay cell phones, goodness, because now we can make these adjustments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Helps.
I guess the last couple of things would just be, remember when you need the collar, you'd have it. When you don't need it, you don't have it. The use of this should start to go down. Once we clear up the conversation with the collar and how it works, all that stuff should start to go down, okay? So like if when I get a client that tells me they're using the collar every day, like pressing the button, I go, you're not following the homework because you really shouldn't be having to use it all the time. I can only take as far as you're willing to go, of course. The prey drive is the variable here, and which is most likely why the scooter thing and all that stuff is happening. It's all prey driven. Because you said once they stop, they're fine. Yeah. So it's really the chase thing, right? Other than that, it's pretty much it. Any other questions?
I don't think so.
Okay.
What do you think of them?
Temperament-wise, looks-wise,
Yeah, well, they're
best looking
so
dogs I've ever
dirty
seen.
right now and disgusting. I was gonna try and give them a bath beforehand. We do a lot of playing at the Forest Preserve Dog Park.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's very muddy. And he also had an incident of being stung by a bunch of bees.
Ooh.
Which is why he's so, like with a fly around, he's like very focused on flying things because of that.
Mm.
But,
Oh. I don't get many poodles.
no?
No. I probably had a handful throughout the years. Lots of doodles.
Yeah.
Bernedoodles,
Well,
Shiba
I mean,
doodles,
that's all you see now.
Labradoodles, golden
Everyone's
doodles.
like, oh my God, are these real poodles?
Yeah. I'm waiting for the pit boodles.
That's funny, you're right. That's like the one thing I haven't seen because every other thing is mixed with a poodle.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't,
Bernedoodles.
multiple,
I think
Bernedoodle, Burma doodles, Sheepa doodle.
I think Rotties are even mixed with doodles now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like a Rottidoodle. Yeah.
Nah,
They
That-
must look funny.
Yeah. I've seen all sorts of stuff.
it's crazy. Because I'm always, they're like, well, my kids are allergic. I'm like, yeah, I'm super allergic to dogs. I'm like, that's why I got poodles. Like, get an actual poodle.
Yeah.
Like, why are you just trying to, whatever.
I had two clients. One had wanted a like a mini teacup doodle,
Yeah.
like a golden doodle, and I had another client that wanted a regular size golden doodle, right? So the one that wanted the regular size golden doodle ended up with a teacup, and the other one ended up with a large one. And they're like, why? I go, because this is not a breed. This is a mutt.
Right,
This is a mutt. This is not calculated. Like it's a gamble.
Yeah, no
You know. But I thought it was the most hilarious thing that they got the complete opposites. I'm like, you guys want to trade?
Yeah, no kidding.
But yeah,
You, but they seem sweet, right?
yeah. No, I mean nothing I haven't seen before.
Like, they're fine.
Everybody.
Hey.
Nothing I've not seen before.
Yeah.
So, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Tina will help with your booking.
Okay.
If you want to kind of expedite the process, you can tell her, hey, Tina, I want to go for 6 or whatever. Please send me the contract. And then if you send her windows of time, people will send like, oh, Friday at 4 o'clock, Saturday at 2. No, we need windows because she's working with a number of clients. But yeah, you can send her like, sign me up for 6 or what have you. Here's my availability, because that's what she's going to ask you for. And it just eliminates a step. And then she'll send you a contract, a link to fill out the contract. And then she'll help you with all the scheduling stuff and anything like that. Okay?
Perfect.
If you have any questions about the contract, please feel free to ask. But it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty much just common sense stuff. But yeah, nothing I've not seen before. So
Okay, what just happened there, is that like, sometimes I'm like, I actually want my dogs to react when some strange person like comes.
yeah, to me that's a nervous response.
Yeah,
Because everything was fine, and then when there's a sudden shift in the environment, so like when they saw Xena,
yeah,
right? That's usually nervous. Okay. It's nothing good or bad. Like people become nervous, people get anxious, right? Is that nervous dogs tend to calm down when things are fine, but then when there's a sudden shift in the environment, there's that big kind of outburst. Anxious dogs tend to not let things go in the sense of like they're constantly pacing and salivating and stuff. Like she actually ended up calming down,
Yeah.
but in the beginning she was under stress. But she did let it go, which is good. I get dogs the entire consultation, they're just like on edge. Fear doesn't let it go. As long as the thing that they're scared of is in the environment, they'll stay in that kind of wary mindset. So that was, for me, was a nervous response. Everything was fine. Things were calm. They're relaxed. They're getting comfortable. And then somebody jiggles the door handle, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
barking and
I
stuff like that.
I want them, if somebody tries to.
That's what, it's like, I
That's
want
the
them to do that at home, but for instance, I've been a couple times like sitting outdoors at a coffee place and they're under the table and fine, and I'm, you know, for whatever reason, someone walks by in a hoodie or like something that's like, there can be people going by, there's activity, and then all of a sudden something which, then it's like, if I'm caught off guard and I maybe, I mean, it's never happened, I've always had their leashes or whatever, they've never run away, but I'm worried about that, like, what if I didn't see that coming, or, you know, but I don't know if that can be trained out, a nervous.
To a degree, yes. We cannot make them unnervous, but we can teach them how to handle it better. Okay? It's not going to eliminate security in the sense that, like, because this is a very common question, where someone has like a dog that's human reactive. And they go, Jesse, I don't want my dog to do that because obviously liability, but at the same time, if someone's trying to hurt me, like, I go, right, but those are two different contexts. A person jogging past you versus a person coming at you is a completely different context, and the dogs are able to decipher between the two. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it can be worked on. Once we get to the point of addressing reactivity and stuff, once you understand it, it's just a matter of applying and reinforcing. And it's not to say that they'll never be startled. You know, like I get startled sometimes.
Right.
You know, it's just not all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, I've seen that stuff too. Okay.
Everybody says, oh, they're barking. Well, there's
So dogs.